episode is sponsored by Teamhood, a modern project management system.
Hey Jurgen, nice to have you on the Agile couch. That's how we are called in English, in Lithuanian, and Agile sofas. I've been in your speech. It was very nice and inspiring, I would say, with the new framework that you presented.
Not a framework.
It's a kind of framework.
Okay.
Kind of framework, but okay. So how would you call it? What
A
is
pattern library.
Pattern library.
Yeah, a collection of practices, but the pattern library is how it is, how these things are usually called, because nothing is mandatory. That's the difference between a pattern library and a framework. A framework implies that there is a structure that is static,
Boundaries.
boundaries that you must have. That is the minimal required thing to have, and within the framework you can replace things, but there is no framework, so there's only the individual patterns that you can use and build what you want.
It's a good catch. It's not a framework. It's a pattern library.
That's how I describe
really
it.
wonder about the name of it, because once I've heard it the first time, I've been following you on LinkedIn for many years. Of course, I know what you're posting, and once you announce that there's an UNFIX, and so Jurgen wants to fix something or unfix, or
Unfixing
so. What's the idea of the name? I'm just really curious. And
Yeah, well, that's the branding, that it makes you curious,
Okay.
which is by design, because it sort of puts people off and they wonder what do you mean fixing or unfixing. So the curiosity is intentional.
Okay.
And the idea is deconstructing frameworks, breaking them apart, breaking down the methods into the individual patterns that they are made of, and then with those patterns, make your own methods, design your own thing, create your own framework for your organization. The patterns are the same, but you will probably use different ones in different contexts, in different combinations. So that makes it all more flexible, more versatile, as I often say. And so that's why I use unfixing instead of fixing, because fixing is making, making it
not
static.
that static.
Yeah. So unfixing is pulling it apart, and it came from unframework for innovation and experiences. So that's what the letters sort of stand for.
Okay, gotcha. So UNFIX have not that stable, but instead allow to diverge and create different patterns and use that pattern library.
Exactly. As the example, the metaphor I gave of the Lego box, you can use the same bricks in different ways, depending on what you need. You put them together in different ways
to create whatever you want. I wonder, Jurgen, probably you're aware about LESS and its usual implementation. I know that it's not comparable LESS with UNFIX, but for the scenario, if let's say that organization agrees to or wants to implement large-scale Scrum, I think that they are all the time preparing, and then there is an event called Kaikaku, if I'm not mistaken, where they flip the coin, and from that moment all the roles changes, the structures, the teams, and how everyone works. So I would say that's a very aggressive way of doing that.
Yep.
I wonder, have you been thinking for the UNFIX pattern libraries how to evolve them and start using them in the organization, and even how to overcome the biases that we or leaders, the teams usually have? So how do we change, and how do we start using these patterns? Maybe we need that stream crew, or how you call it.
Yeah.
We need that facilitation crew, but
yeah. So in complexity science, I've learned that there is continuous change and there's disruptive change. The Japanese words are kaizen and kaikaku. Indeed, and you need a bit of both. You can get a long way with continuous change, kaizen. You climb up a mountain and you get better and better, but at some point you probably get to a local optimum. You cannot climb any further because every other direction is down again.
Okay.
But only when you're at the top metaphorically speaking, then you see what other hills out there are even higher. But to get there, you'll have to jump, or you have to get worse before things get better. And that is the reason to do a Kaizen. So, okay, now we know what the landscape looks like with continuous change. We have experience. We know a bit better what challenges we're facing. Now we're going to do a Kaizen thing. So I'm not against Kaizen. I'm not against disruptive change. Sometimes you need it because you're stuck in your area where you have been operating. But I would suggest you only do that after doing Kaizen for a while, understanding the landscape. And you can do that with the UNFIX patterns because you adopt some individual patterns. You can do a value stream crew. You can have a facilitation crew, and maybe you want to consider a platform crew. Those are individual changes. A forum is very easy to introduce. You can do those one by one. But maybe at some point you realize this is not, we're now stuck because we have this matrix organization, for example, that will have to cut up into individual business units. And that is a drastic change. Then you need to introduce a base and say, okay, well, this 50 people or something like that, 20, 100, whatever, needs its own management team, and they have to stay out of everything else. So we remove the managers from any teams that they are involved in. That's a disruptive change. But maybe you can only do that if you did a number of other Kaizen things first. Then you know better.
Prepared for that.
Then you're sort of prepared for it. You've practiced with some patterns, and then you can do the rigorous ones that at some point probably will be needed. I talked about Haier, the Chinese company, 11, 12 years ago. They fired all their middle managers. That was a Kaikaku
that's a huge
event.
thing.
That was a huge thing. But they didn't do that on day one. They tried stuff before. They had some experiments.
So that was an evolution of the step that they took.
Exactly.
But not like, let's do this.
They came to a point where they said, okay, now we cannot continue without completely disrupting the organization. They switched from Kaizen to Kaikaku.
Okay, gotcha. I have two questions related to your model that actually I was curious about. One was the question about how you call it, that the big clan, tribe, that contains all the different crews. The base. So usually I assume and understand that in the organization that I'm working right now, we can call it different bases, multiple bases, tribes, clans. Is there a way that you describe, or have you thought of in that pattern library, how these bases might collaborate? Because at the end, I'm still thinking that there is organization, so they are about to create some unified value or some that they're in common. They have that's why the organization. So how do these bases collaborate together? What are the patterns you thought of, if there's anything?
Basically, the same patterns repeat at the next level up. So just as individuals get together to form a value stream crew, an agile team or something like that within a base, you can imagine at the next level up that multiple bases get together to form what I call a value stream cluster. There's a couple of bases that self-organize and decide to create a product together. This is how it works at Haier, the Chinese company I talked about. They have 4,000 of these, as they call them, micro-enterprises. And each one is
huge company.
Each one is about 15 people or something. They have bigger ones and smaller ones, but the average size is 15. That's not much. So you cannot make 10,000 vacuum cleaners with just 15 people. You'll need a bit more. But they have different kinds of units, and they'll find each other. Someone will have the idea to come up with a new type of vacuum cleaner. They will have to convince some of the others and say, okay, well, we think this is worth doing. We're going to share the revenue, because everything is horizontal, so the revenue will be shared, profit split, whatever, and they get together and they sign contracts, and all of that is automated on the blockchain, smart contracting, whatsoever, super modern. and then they make it happen, and then they work together with 5, 6 micro enterprises in a value stream cluster,
Yeah,
as I
fantastic.
would call it. And then they have others who provide services. So other units have factories available where you can go make your vacuum cleaner, for example. So they hire a factory from another part of the network, and they can choose from different ones. So which one is the best? Which one has capacity and availability?
That would help out for
That
their product. Yeah.
can help us make that vacuum cleaner where our teams can go. And so there's lots of platform micro enterprises that offer those services.
You know what it sounds for me once you were saying that there is not that clear business owner in this case then, or kind of product owner, because like there are two bases that meets, they have idea, then they hire another one that is factory, and then there's a fourth one that helps with something else. Or
Well, someone has the lead.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, someone has the idea, so that is the leading unit, the leading base, the leading micro enterprise, and so they have the vision, but they
kind of need help from all
they
around.
invite others, and they're all entrepreneurs. They all own their own parts of the company, literally in many cases, where they have shares in their micro enterprise. So they invite others, and then they will make sure that there is someone who manages what the product's going to look like and what features will be there, because that needs to be coordinated. And so, yeah, I don't know how exactly they do that. It's not my concern.
Yeah.
I just know they will probably have a product owner or a product manager appointed.
That someone is more responsible
Of
for.
course, to figure out what features do we need and what features are should-haves and must-haves, or whatever terminology they want to use. But the point is, it's a network, and they come together horizontally, and the CEO does not decide which new products are launched, which business models the entrepreneurs try out. They decide for themselves.
Yeah, and I assume they have still some goals, some business perspectives they want to reach, visions, and based on that comes into the game.
Yeah.
One another topic or question that I am really curious about, I've actually thought of asking you this, and then I've noticed that yesterday you put a post on LinkedIn about that.
Okay.
And that was about the teams, different teams, the
Yeah.
stable teams, dynamic teams, fluid
Right.
teams, and I've seen that you use different vocabularies for different the definitions of the teams.
Yeah.
And within these days, it's coming more and more popular to talk about maybe dynamic reteaming is a thing.
Yep.
Maybe we don't need stable teams anymore. Maybe we need flexible teams.
Yep.
Would you say good examples of or your recommendations for using stable team versus flexible fluid team, like for the listeners to understand that's the good recipe for this is the good recipe for that? What would
Well, it is not my job to give recommendations which pattern to use. My job is to recognize that there are different patterns, there are different possibilities, and then offer these as options in the Lego box, in the UNFIX collection, and say, you figure it out.
Go ahead, grab it.
Yeah, pick and choose, because you are in the best position to decide what fits my context or not. And so I disagree with those who say you should have stable, long-lived teams. How do you know? That makes no sense in the airline industry to have long-lived, stable teams. They have a different team per flight. And that is the best solution for that context. So that I call them mission teams. They are literally on a mission from one place to the other, and then they dissolve and they form another. But they meet each other again and again on different flights. So the bigger base consists of the same people, so they know everyone, and the typical things such as forming, storming, norming, performing, all of that happens at another level, right? That happens at a level higher. With the larger group.
Within the base, I mean, because they're
Exactly.
anyways within
the base, so that they do that, they train for that, so that they know that we can make any combination of stewards, stewardesses, pilots, and they will know how to get the plane from A to B. We can rely, and we don't need to send the manager with them. They take care of that plane.
Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. So the manager doesn't need to be with the team to
be able
monitor
to-
everything. That's the analogy I use, but that works in the airline industry. It is very different if you operate a coffee bar or if you operate a call center. So there are lots of different contexts, and long-lived stable teams are usually a good solution in IT, indeed. But even there, people realize that, well, actually not always.
It's not always.
Actually, there are benefits to reteaming. It is becoming more popular now, indeed, because of the book of Dynamic Reteaming by Heidi Helfand and others come to the same conclusions. There are benefits for employees, for the people, to have flexibility, to be able to choose which mission they want to be part of,
self-selection,
which thing they want to contribute to. So in fast agile and in fluid scrum teams, people themselves decide which sprint goal they want to be involved in. So every sprint goal, they have a different combination of people. By definition, always enthusiastic, motivated people, because they picked.
They self-selected themselves into that. I'm interested in.
So they have a mechanism. Of course, you need some kind of constraint, making sure that all the goals have at least some people. So you do not always have your number one priority or number one preference. There are rules you can make for that. But the important thing is, no manager pushes people around and says who should we work on what. There's no product manager telling any team this is the feature that you will be doing, and another team this is the feature you will be doing. No, they select themselves. It's more employee engagement you get.
Definitely.
And so some people say, well, what about velocity? That might drop. What about the speed of if you optimize for velocity, you're optimizing the wrong thing.
Yeah, doesn't sound good.
You need to optimize for. You need to optimize the customer experience, and the customer doesn't care who is working on what.
Exactly. That's within your given example of the app using website and app.
Right, and you need to optimize the employee experience, because otherwise people quit their jobs. And the reason that, for example, one of my favorite examples is at Pipedrive, where they invented the Pipedrive Agile framework. They specifically introduced reteaming to keep people, because otherwise they went away. The software developers went to other companies.
Within these times,
Yeah, the CIO told me. So they came up with a mechanism that allowed people to work on what they wanted, that engineers were leading. They wanted to pick and choose. And if, as a product owner, you were not able to get people enthusiastic for your idea, well, tough luck. Improve your pitch. Because it's easier to get product owners than engineers. So the engineers have the biggest say in what they want to work on.
Gotcha. Well, thank you very much, Jurgen, for such a nice chat. We spent about 15-20 minutes. The time went really fast.
Awesome.
It was really fantastic to have you here on our couch sofa. I'm sure that more of information about that unfixed pattern library, not a framework, you can find it unfix.org.
That works. Yeah, unfix.org.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sure we'll post a link there. Thanks once again for a nice chat. It was nice to meet you, and see you here in Vilnius.
Likewise. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks.